Foster, to welcome you to this extremely important conference examining energy security on the rapidly shifting geostrategic situation in the Middle East. Each one of our speakers has such an illustrious biography that it would fill up all of our allotted time to be able to introduce them. So I'm just going to give a brief thumbnail sketch of each. We first of all are extremely honored to have Senator Todd Young from Indiana with us this morning. Senator Young serves on 4 very distinguished committees in the U.S. Senate, but most relevant to our discussion here today, he serves on the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, where he chairs the subcommittee on multilateral international development, multilateral institutions, and economics, energy, and environmental policy. So without further ado, Senator Todd Young.
Thank you, Sarah. Everyone give Sarah a round of applause.
All right, Sarah.
So it is, it's really my privilege to be here with this esteemed panel of individuals. I will try and keep my remarks brief, but here to focus on energy security and the cooperation that can be realized by partnering with others to address issues of scarcity. Now, when one thinks of issues of scarcity, whether it's water, or medical supplies, or food, or other essentials to life, like energy, oftentimes that leads to conflict. That's historically, I think, the paradigm through which we've operated. But we also know that there are opportunities associated with scarcity, none more front and center in our mind, none more front and center in our geopolitics than the energy opportunities in the Middle East. Not long ago, I had an opportunity to sit down with some members of the U.S. State Department and discuss this very issue. And we talked about some of the energy resources located in the Eastern Mediterranean. It was a classified briefing, so I won't get into some of the classified geopolitics that we discussed, but it gave me a real appreciation for just the bounty of resources located in that region, oil and natural gas in particular. Almost a year ago, we consummated, I say because there are many friends and partners who are parties to this agreement, and the American people benefit when these friendships are deepened and broadened. But it was Israel and Egypt and Cyprus and other regional players, as those in this room know, who came together and created the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum. As many of you know, this is going to open up the possibility, and that's what it is right now, the possibility of creating a 1,200-mile pipeline connecting the reserves of the Levantine Basin with Europe via Cyprus and Crete. At the same time, Israeli and Egyptian expertise and resources can be brought to bear. The agreement for Israel is to transport natural gas to Egypt, where it will be liquefied and then shipped to Europe and other destinations. Takes advantage of Israel's incredible natural resources. But Egypt has excess capacity to produce hydrocarbons, so it's natural to connect these two partners, and they are indeed partners in many respects. It's also is a way to leverage the outstanding transportation infrastructure that is already in place, necessary to export to European countries and meet energy demands in Europe. There'd be a much diminished dependence on Russia. It's a byproduct of this overall effort. I have not outlined all the facets and features of the agreement and all the potentialities of it. Perhaps that will be something discussed by other panelists, maybe in the Q&A session a bit later. But the bottom line here is this opens the door for broader connectivity between countries. It increases the opportunity for cooperation when it comes to scarcity. This creates difficult to measure possibilities. When you start to flex the muscles to establish the muscle memory of cooperation, but between, say, the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots, who will have to work together in the course of this agreement, then good things can happen. Then unity may indeed come. And this is a variant, I think, of what Tom Friedman years ago characterized as the Macdonalds theory of international relations, right? It was, which I think has since then been violated, but the exception proves the rule. If two different countries have Macdonalds, if they, one could infer from that, if they are trading countries and they are likely to trade with one another, they are unlikely to fight with one another. This is a variant of that. Cooperation can indeed lead to peace, and I think aside from providing vital natural resources from countries who will not be threatening to interrupt supply, as the Russians did some time ago to the Europeans, there's another facet here that needs to be teased out, which is just the value of working together, not just through military exercises, not just through formal diplomatic channels, not just through trading, but the value of working together to come up with creative solutions to dealing with, in this case, energy scarcity. And it's a field of international relations more broadly that I think is deserving a further exploration and study. But I'm most excited about how it directly impacts the Middle East and the future stability and security of the people of Israel, who of course are our strongest partners and allies in that region. So thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Our next speaker, I don't know how long you could stay, but we have a very esteemed group. It's my supreme honor to introduce you to a dear friend and phenomenal intellect and scholar, Dr. Efraim Inbar. Efraim is the director of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. He was the founder and director of the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies at Tel Aviv University, and he's a professor for many, many years at Bar-Ilan University. Among many, many things, he chaired the Committee for the National Security Education Curriculum for the Ministry of Education and is the president of the Israel Association of International Studies. Dr. Efraim Inbar, please.
Thank you. You have to go.
I regret I do. Another mission, as the
Another
general
mission.
said. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you
bless.
so much, Senator.
Well, the talk of the senator was to some extent characteristic of the immediate post-Cold War. You know, when everybody was nicely behaving, and when the Mediterranean, which we see there, was basically an American lake. There was a strong U.S. Sixth Fleet there, and it was what the Romans say, Mare Nostrum, our lake. But much has changed, actually, and if we take a look today at this map, of course, we all know the cuts in the American Navy and other forces. It's not there. Assad in '91 joined the American forces against Iraq. Nowadays, it's a different story, of course. He didn't care much about the Obama ultimatum on using gas against his enemies. And we also see withdrawal by President Trump of forces from northern Syria. So Syria is a different, it's a civil war, and we see actually, the Americans are out and the Russians are in. We see a Russian presence in Syria. Russia is now viewed in the Middle East, in the Levant, as a reliable ally in contrast to the United States. The Russians call the shots in Syria, the Astana process. They are involved in Egypt. I don't want to go too much into the details because I have limited time. And I just read today that the Russians send mercenaries to Libya in the civil war. And of course, they are also in the Gulf. Another big change, of course, since the rosy times of the post-Cold War is the radical Islamist threat. And if we take a look at the map, Libya, there are Islamist elements there, that's Libya. In Egypt, in Egypt, we had for a while an Islamist regime during Morsi times, and they still fight Islamist insurgency in Sinai. If we go further along the coast, Gaza, there is competition there between two Islamic movements, between Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. If we go on, Lebanon is Hezbollah. There is no Lebanese state. It's run by Hezbollah, another Islamist organization. In Syria, further north, the Iranians have a strong presence. They try to establish this Shiite corridor, which Israel is fighting against. And if we take another country, there Turkey. Turkey is ruled by Islamist regime. Erdogan is in NATO, and Turkey is in NATO, but they do not share the values of NATO Western countries. Cyprus is a small state. It's bullied by the Turks. If people talk about gas explorations, Turkish ships prevent it. Greece is weak. It's a small country with a lot of economic problems, and the US withdrawal leaves those pro-Western countries weak and exposed to Turkish revisionism, which will be elaborated more by my colleague Eitan. Israel is, of course, a strong country, facing several fronts. As a result of the American withdrawal, we become more important to US interests because nobody is there to fight for you there. It's us. And of course, we have more freedom of action. As superpowers leave, the local actors have more freedom of action. And I just want to end my remarks by pointing out that the East Mediterranean has been the border, in history, between the West and the East. After the end of the Cold War, the border of the West has moved eastward. What we're seeing now is that the Persians, are coming back, and the border, is moving actually westward, and this should be of great concern to Western states. I'll stop there. This is my strategic overview.
Wonderful. And now it's my honor to introduce you to Colonel Eran Lerman. He's the Vice President of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security and teaches at the Shalem College. He has held senior posts in the IDF for over 20 years and was Deputy Director for Foreign Policy at the National Security Council of the Prime Minister's Office from 2009 to 2000.
Thank you. First of all, I was very glad that the Senator mentioned the EMGF because when I run this little exercise, I ask people if they know what the EMGF stands for. Very few people in Israel or this side of the water know, which is my ultimate proof that good news travel nowhere. whereas disasters are front page. Here's an organization that was put together this year, January, another meeting in July, in Cairo. Italy, Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority, the ministers of energy, have already met twice. Last time this was attended by US Secretary of Energy Rick Perry. It is also supported by the European Union, which to see them doing something positive is in itself a delight. And this is basically a very powerful message that Eastern Mediterranean Energy Cooperation can be the basis for even further things. In fact, very quickly, if I can roll this off my tongue, I would give you a list of 8 E reasons, all of them begin with an E, as to why Eastern Mediterranean integration has become so important in the world that Efraim Inbar has just described to you. First and foremost, in my mind, and looking at the history of how this actually came about, is actually Egypt, the first E. Because the stability and the, well, I wouldn't say prosperity, but the ability of Egypt to stay afloat rather than go belly up, a nation of 100 million at our border, is absolutely vital to us, but also to regional and global stability. So I could go on, but these are bullet points. Secondly, we've already heard the name Erdogan, another E, a challenger of the existing order, taking Turkey, which should be our friend and could be our friend, on a course of enmity which is increasingly troubling, destabilizing the parts of the region. And the latest, as you will hear, is his new notion of a common EEZ border with Libya, which is supposed to bottle Israel, Egypt, and Cyprus away from Europe. The third is energy, clearly.
They show it on the map.
Yeah, they assume that since they have this area here, that they can claim an EEZ diagonally across the Mediterranean as if Crete wasn't there. Which is going to be, even the European Union has already reacted quite sharply to this assertion. Third is energy, and you'll hear more about it. Fourth, you notice that the Senator mentioned exercises. The IDF has just concluded a major special forces exercise in Cyprus, attended by our Chief of Staff. So that we are raising the profile. This is not the first, it's the fourth time our special forces went to train in high wooded terrain in Cyprus, and they don't even hide the fact that this is designed for Lebanese scenarios. And the Cypriots are more than welcoming and participate in this, and that's part of a larger pattern. Tripartite naval exercises, Noble-Dina, Israel, the United States, and Greece. Air Force exercises, the Greeks participated in the Blue Flag biannual Air Force exercises in Israel, and the IAF regularly participates in the EONHOS exercises in Greece. So the Greek Cypriot-Israeli nexus is becoming ever tighter. And that's reflected, by the way, also in diaspora relations in this country and elsewhere, Greek and pro-Israeli communities coming together. Energy, I mentioned. Environment, the fragile environment of Eastern Mediterranean. Economic cooperation. Emergencies, joint responses to emergencies like forest fires, but also potentially man-made emergencies such as the Iranian attack on the Israeli ports and airports could make Cyprus very important to us in certain circumstances. And finally, Europe, where Greece and Cyprus, as members of the EU, can be very helpful to Israel in basically preventing other more hostile European players from putting forward anti-Israeli initiatives. So basically, I could call it it's a Cypriot horse at the center of Brussels. And since most EU decisions are taken by consensus, having Greek and Cypriot allies there, as well as friends from Eastern Europe, from elsewhere in Eastern Europe, is a very important thing for us. So all of this comes together and is turning the emergence of the Israeli Hellenic bloc, if you want to call it that, and the parallel relationship emerging between Greece, Cyprus, and Egypt into the building blocks of a new regional security architecture. And perhaps one last teaser, I would actually advocate that we use the term Middle East less and less. It encompasses 4 different regions, the whole of Africa and the Red Sea zone, the Gulf, which lives by its own rules, where no citizen of Qatar ever did a day's work in their life. It's a very different environment than ours in the Levant, in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Maghreb, or the Western Mediterranean basin, its southern part. All of these are different regions with different dynamics. Our notion that Israel is an Eastern Mediterranean country with deep links to our Eastern Mediterranean partners is by now no longer an intellectual exercise. It is shored up by energy and by strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have so many distinguished members of our panel. It's hard to choose who I should introduce next, but I will do it in order of military rank. So we will go with a major general, okay?
He should have been first.
Right. Okay.
It's the best way to listen to both of them. Come to conclusion. I have to think about the ninth letter E.
Right, exactly.
My name Eitan.
Right. So Major General Eitan Dangot has an extremely distinguished military career. He's served as the Defense Secretary for 3 Secretaries of Defense, and most recently, among other things, he was the IDF's coordinator of government activities in Judea, Samaria, and the Gaza Strip.
Okay, thank you very much. I was listening very deeply to my colleague before, to the senator, gave a lot of information. It's like a puzzle that you have to take, but on the other hand, I studied how in a short time you both got the most important things, and that saves some time, a large time of hours. I would like to focus on some issues that in my opinion are looking and using the corner of the Southeast Middle East, Mediterranean as one of the options in the Middle East to try to balance the big threat that we have now from the northeast of Israel, from the Iranian activities that are coming as a block on a wing between Tehran, Baghdad, Damascus, and of course Beirut, and coming already towards the Mediterranean Sea. On that fact, and what was mentioned, few things that are very important for Israel. First of all, without having resources or something you can share with others, you don't have any value in that region. And that brought me to the 70s, 80s, while I was that time a child or young, just joined to the IDF, where we were so in pressure and problem concerning all the boycotts from bringing Israel the resources for fuel, electricity, develop the industry, transportation, etc. The big miracle has been happened during the time of something like 2010 and the last 10 years, has brought this part of the Middle East, is the economic water of Israel, to find out 3, and I hope will be much more looking for gas opportunities in the Mediterranean. If I add into it what was found by Egypt and also by Cyprus, it brought a new value to this corner of this area. I want to add 2 things for that corner that was just described by Eran and Efraim before, that we have to see that around the Mediterranean you have the, let's say, the triangle meeting point between Europe, Africa, and the beginning of Asia. At that part, the area of the southeast that calls Africa and around the Israel and the Lebanon will be in the coming 20 years the increased number of population that has to be, according to some estimation that was made, something like more than 100 million people will add to this region. Most of them, even 50%, will be in the 2 main from the 4 Arab Muslim countries in our region, Egypt and Turkey. I mean the other 2 are Saudi Arabia and of course Iran. And that part, it means that this area will need dramatically prepare itself for adding much more energy to supply the needs for the people. And that issue of the energy resources that changed the picture in the Middle East, and was mentioned, the relationship between Israel, Egypt, Cyprus, Greek, and on the door is now Italy as well, to be the goalkeeper towards the European area itself. It means that there are a lot of opportunities that, in my opinion, give, first of all, a looking that besides tactic things that can happen and can take you to another way, like we are facing in Gaza sometimes, in this area you see the policy of Egypt and the other countries so clear that it means that their leaders are looking for 1 generation above, and that it means that this kind of relationship between Israel, Egypt, and the others are something that breaking it will break the internal security strategic policy of those countries for the future. What does it mean? First of all, what we have now already has been Israel have the opportunity to supply its need for many years above for all the energy, and my Director General from the Union will give you minutes about it, some information. All the need for our energy is completely covered by what we achieve, and I hope will be achieved in the future. Secondly, Israel already signed agreement with Jordan of supplying energy to Jordan. Just a little bit of cynic, it's not so attempt to the recent statements that are done by the Jordanian king. I think that we have to put more attention to West Jordan, because Jordan has a high value as a goalkeeper towards the east, where Iran and the other area, and we have to find a way to balance situation and to support. But one thing is clear, the king is very smart, understanding that his most of energy for the future for his country will come to Israel, and it already has been running a pilot in the past. Secondly, cooperation between Israel and Egypt. It means both countries with supplying the gas energy to Egypt. It means besides the fact that Egypt is looking to cover its own needs now and for the future, Egypt can done with the LNG producing, sending ships to Asia and selling all their energy and passing it to Asia as one of the main sources to Egypt to be such empire in this region for such a thing. Now I'm coming to Cyprus, of course, and Greek, but the main 2 points that I would like to put, and one was mentioned, first of all, Turkey. We have to find a way to combine Turkey to this kind of policy. A few years ago, there was some negotiation between Israel and Turkey about this kind of opportunity has been explored, and you know Arad-1 policy, but in my opinion, as a military officer, many years, we are looking, and when we have to look to prevent any kind of bloodshed in the area. And what we have here, that economy will bring security, as security brings economy. And Turkey now blocked with the statement with Libya of making or dividing the economical water between them, they just put a block on that area. The second is Lebanon. Lebanon is a very important country, because in Lebanon you have, and it was mentioned, the deployment of the big terror organization, I think all over the world, that is not a state, the Hezbollah, which is supported by Iran, and it's the proxy and the main proxy that Iran will not hesitate to use it against Israel in the future. The moment you are taking from Hezbollah, like today, and they are very calculative organization, they have to decide in each activity between discipline towards the ideologic capital from Tehran, or the bubbling situation that is now over Lebanon, and to lose their strengths inside Lebanon. What does it mean that in that case, we have to do the best with the help of the United States and maybe French to bring Lebanon on discussion with Israel on sharing and dividing the economical water in the Mediterranean, to let Lebanon to find its resources there, and then the loss of price for this country will be something that will keep it and thinking few times before it's starting and joining Hezbollah, and Hezbollah will be under much more pressure, and this factor that it has to keep its interest inside Lebanon. Now I would like another remark, it's about United States and Russia. Russia become a main player in this region. The United States declared, but not yet, and I hope it will stay in some point in Syria, because it gave us the umbrella that the region is needed now. But on the other hand, Russia is looking towards Libya, to what's going in the Mediterranean. Just remember, on the 70s, Russia has some places on the Mediterranean area from the Africa bases, and we have to share with Russia the same, but the new group of ministers of energy that met in Cairo in 2019, I think in the middle, it was the best sign that get from the United States the umbrella for the region, and I think the United States should stay there and be like the navigator of what is going in this area. All I just described you are the points that shows now that besides the military factor that Israel looks strong and brought the others to think in a different way, the new resources of energy bring the other hope to the Middle East that from the west towards the east will be such a joint venture between countries that will delay any kind of ideas of creating a kind of pressures in our area, and also be a red light towards Iranian and others activities that are trying to be in this area. So I think that we are in the best opportunity from economical point to create another region with all the threats that are very serious that we are facing today. Thank you.
Okay, Amir Foster. Okay. He currently serves as the executive director of the Israeli Association of Oil and Gas Exploration Industries. He's worked as a senior energy analyst for Israel's financial markets, and in 2012 established the Foster Consultancy Group, which specializes in the energy sector, particularly natural gas and energy in general. Thank you so much, Amir.
Thank you, dear Sarah. Dear friends, I will start with that. That I think that it's not by a chance that American company find all the gas resource that we have in Israel. I think it's something that can represent the unique relations between Israel and the US, and I will elaborate about that. Because those findings of 1,000 BCM, which find by American company in Israel, today natural gas represent 40% of our primary energy consumption. Till 15 years ago, we didn't have any local research for energy. Today, because of American company, we can consume 40% of our energy from domestic resources. But this is only the start. From 2025, I will go a little bit before that. In 2021, the capacity production of energy will be more than all our energy needs in Israel. In the first time in the history of Israel, Israel can produce more energy than all the needs of Israel. If I talked about it 20 or 30 years before, people could think that I'm nuts or something like that. Israel, in 1.5 years, can produce more energy than we need. And the natural gas brings the Israel economy a lot of benefits. It's cheaper than oil. It's much cleaner than coal and oil. So we saved billions of shekels during the last years. And the pollution and greenhouse emission in Israel went down dramatically. The next step, which is not less important than economic steps, than the economic benefits and the environmental benefits, is the export opportunities that we have to our natural gas. A year and a half ago, I met Tarek El-Mula, is the energy minister of Egypt. I met him in Cairo. And he told me how important is for Egypt is to import gas from Israel. It's import for Egypt for security, energy security for Egypt first, and it's important for them because they can, after they will fulfill all the domestic demand in Egypt, they can export the gas through the liquefaction plants that they already have. I think that maybe I'm a little bit too young to say that, but I think that we never had such alliance with an Arab country that our interests, economic interests and energy interests, were exactly the same. We are playing in the same group today. And our regime and the Egyptian regime understand that deeply. So the last thing that I want to say is thank you, because without this American company, Noble Energy, I think that we didn't have the chance to talk about all these amazing things that I feel that we are just in a start of something amazing. Thank you.
Was that Noble Energy?
Yeah.
Noble.
Okay, as they say in Hebrew, achron, achron, chaviv. We have a lot of this hinges around Turkey, which has become, unfortunately, a malign player in the region as of late. And Dr. Eytan Cohen Yanarocak is an expert. I'm so sorry.
It's fine. It's in Turkish, sorry.
Is an expert on contemporary Turkish policies and foreign policy, Turkish-Israel relations, and the Kurds. He's co-editor of Turkey Scope, a publication of the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies at Tel Aviv University.
Thank you very much. It's a big honor for me to be here, to be hosted here. Just landed a couple of hours ago from Dallas Airport, came here. So I'm a little tired, but again, it's a great pleasure. Okay, since I was born in Turkey, and already my Efraim, my teacher, he already told you that the Romans regarded the Mediterranean as Mare Nostrum, our sea. When I was in primary school, our teacher in Turkey told us that Mare Nostrum was also Turkish, right? It was a Turkish lake, okay? So we raised, as the Turkish students, the little kids, being, knowing that this was our sea, okay? And we also should not forget that the Turkish Eastern Mediterranean policy is designed by the Turkish existence in Cyprus. In 1974, the Turks carried out an extraterritorial military intervention there, which the Greek Cypriots are calling, of course, invasion, but the Turks are calling it liberation of the northern part of the island, right? So now the Republic of Turkey is not recognizing the rights and even the existence of Republic of Cyprus. So before talking to the continental shelf disagreements with Greece itself, Republic of Turkey is not recognizing the existence of Republic of Cyprus and also its exclusive economic zone maps. So we have, in this situation, two important problems, also between Greece and Turkey, and also between Turkey and Republic of Cyprus. And recently, in November, Turkey signed an agreement with a government of national accord of Libya, and this basically provided a very important basis for legitimacy in terms of international law, because this government is recognized by the United Nations. So we have basically two agreements in clash. An agreement that is signed by Greece and Republic of Cyprus from west to the east. This is the axis. And we have another agreement now from Turkey to Libya. This is the north and south axis. The thing is, the Libyan government is not controlling the shores that is, signed the treaty. The Tobruk government, which is presided by Khalifa Haftar, is controlling this area, and Khalifa Haftar is basically is almost conquering Tripoli, so maybe this agreement will be void in a few months. We don't know. Another important issue is the Turkish, we do see that Mr. Erdogan is adopting a very belligerent rhetoric in the Eastern Mediterranean, but this is only not in rhetoric. He's also supporting this with actions. Since 2011, we do see very concrete reinforcements in the Turkish Navy. They adopted a very important project called Milgem, which is the acronym of Milligemi, which means national warship. And since today, they already could produce 4 corvettes, and they were all sent to the Eastern Mediterranean. And they are making troubles to the Republic of Cyprus's navies. But not only that, they already sent and they already dispatched 2 seismic ships and also 2 drilling ships. And also in order to frighten Greece and Republic of Cyprus, in March 2019 they conducted a very impressive military drill in 3 seas, which is Black Sea, Aegean Sea, and Mediterranean Sea. Totally 103 vessels attended to this military drill. And in this military drill, according to the Turkish press, there were 4 important scenarios. And from our perspective, when we are talking about these projects about Eastern Mediterranean, we should not ignore these 4 scenarios. The first scenario is conquering an enemy island. When we are talking about conquering an enemy island, we are not talking about Cyprus, because the Turks are already there and they do not have to conduct an amphibious maritime attack there. No, we are not talking about Cyprus. We are talking about Lesbos, Chios, Castellorizo, the islands, the Greek islands who are almost adjacent to the Turkish.
Castellorizo is
Castellorizo here,
this is Lesbos,
and this is Chios. Okay, so these islands are almost adjacent to the Turkish borders, okay, to the Turkish shores, and approximately 2 months ago, I came here to deliver another lecture at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and there our Greek colleagues they told that they were very, very much frightened that these 3 islands may be the next victim in case of there will be a new clash between Greece and Turkey. And another important scenario was downing the F-16s of the enemy. Since if we are talking about a NATO ally, why would a NATO ally would classify F-16 as an enemy, right? So what about IFF, identification of friend and foe? Okay, so in this regard, in order to target the Greek and of course also the Israeli F-16s, the Turkish military industries, they produced a new IFF system, okay, so that they can also target the Greek and the Israeli. And according to Tovima newspaper, in July 2019, Turkey brought secretly to the island 42 German-made Leopard tanks next to the Greek border. So Turkey is not only speaking, Turkey is also doing things, and they are threatening the Cypriots on land and also with their navy, and now with this latest agreement with the Libyans, they are also trying to have a better stance in terms of international relations. And again, in Turkey, there are also rumors that Turkey is going to establish a new military base in Cyprus in order to increase its ability of rapid response in Eastern Mediterranean. It will be also for the Turkish Navy, and it will be also for the Turkish Air Forces. So I'm just going to sum up right now. If, from the Turkish point of view, if we want to see a real pipeline, the Eastern Mediterranean pipeline, so the Turks wanted to be included in this project, even if the fact that they are causing us a lot of headaches, because we cannot basically trust the Turks, because in case of a in case of an escalation with the Gaza Strip or with Lebanon, Mr. Erdogan may decide tomorrow morning to close the taps. So we cannot trust Erdogan. But even if we cannot trust Erdogan, Turks want to be inside of this policy, because Turkey's national energy policy is based on an understanding that Turkey should be the energy hub. Turkey is collecting all the pipelines from everywhere, from Russia, from Azerbaijan, from Iran, and they also want to get the Israeli pipeline to Turkey, and from there to pump it into Europe. So when we are thinking about Eastern Mediterranean, it's not only about money for the Turks, it's also for Turk's sovereignty, Cyprus and the recognition of Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus is very much important. The key in this issue is the Cyprus question. If we can make a progress in the Cyprus question, I think we will also make a real progress in the Eastern Mediterranean. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we're going to open up the floor for Q&A, but as the moderator, I think I'm going to ask the first question. I mean, from every single gesture that Recep Tayyip Erdogan has done since he has gone into office, he's proven that he is no longer a trustworthy ally, a partner. And now, even with this deal that he's brokered with Libya, you know, and the drilling off in international waters, what makes you believe that Turkey can actually be a reliable partner?
I did not say that
Yeah,
Turkey will be a reliable partner.
Okay.
I never said that. Even
Okay.
I
You just said
emphasize,
from
no.
the Right.
I said that I'm emphasizing again, Turkey is not a reliable partner.
Okay.
Okay, let's imagine that we invited Turkey to this venture.
Right.
In case of a real escalation in the Gaza Strip
Right.
or in Lebanon, we may face problems.
Right.
So I'm re-emphasizing, I did not
Yeah.
say that Turkey is a reliable partner, but what I'm trying to say, if we want this pipeline, we should, or to give some percentages to Turkey from the profit, or maybe we should persuade them in terms of sovereignty. I really don't know what is the magic formula for that, but I did not say that Turkey is a reliable partner.
Right. Let's open up the floor to Q&A. Richmond?
So Major General touched the subject, but I was curious to know what you think in general is, going clockwise, Russia is very much involved in the region, starting from Turkey with the Turk Stream 2, Syria, they collected their dues from helping the Syrian government in the form of energy deals. In Lebanon, they have an energy firm that's looking for energy. Now in Libya, apparently, they want to collect their dues there as well for their assistance and form a naval base in Libya, the same way the U.S. has its Sixth Fleet. And I was wondering what you think the Russian activity, how that will influence the area, and what the U.S. or the alliance can do in order to back that.
Well, the Russian game is clearly very complicated, and Russia is very, the Russian economy is so totally energy dependent that this is certainly uppermost on their mind. We need to be wary of the possibility that the Russians would look at Israeli, Egyptian, and Cypriot gas exports to Europe as competition. However, they have other considerations, mainly their relationship with Egypt, the relationship with the Egyptian-supported part of Libya, the relationship with Israel, which is important to them because their ability to sustain themselves in Syria, to some extent, is dependent on managing the relationship with Israel. All of this has led the Russians to be very careful in not standing in our way so far in Eastern Mediterranean energy. Moreover, they have deep historical and strategic relations with both the Greeks and the Cypriots. And they look favorably upon the Israeli-Greek-Cypriot common interest. They are, as you've heard, they have links with Egypt, and they are supporting the Egyptian-supported forces in the Libyan war. So quite a lot of what the Russians are doing in the Eastern Mediterranean is not necessarily against our region. It actually may fit with our region. In Syria, we are doing our best to drive a wedge between the Russians and the Iranians, telling the Russians that if Assad turns Syria into an Iranian playground, the consequences for their own interests in Syria may be quite severe. And all of this rests, at the end of the day, on Israeli military capabilities, which the Russians have a very healthy respect for. They've met us before, and they know a thing or two that, you know, the Iranians bluster, but the Russians know. These are very two different attitudes.
On the other hand, I would like to head towards the United States that you asked, that should be stay in the region. I mean, wherever it's empty region without the representation of the United States, Russia has open field and can try to build its strategic activities by its own, of course. When you have this kind of involvement of the United States on one part, in the Mediterranean area, on the other side, even in few places in Syria, even tactically, it has a lot of meaning of strategically. So in my way of thinking, we should keep the United States and we should recommend the United States to be a main player in the area and to find the tools how to do it, because it's interior decisions, not even by military, but their interest, like they did in the energy field in the Mediterranean, is very clear. It gave a big win to those partners today to continue on its way. And it's making a balance also in Syria, and by the way, it's helping sometimes Russia to control much more better the area of Syrian land when the United States is still involved them in some cases as well.
I would advise my government not to advocate further American involvement in our region. Basically, understanding the political sensitive, domestic political sensitivity in the United States about their long involvement, which was not that successful. It would be, in my view, a great mistake that we should push for American involvement. We should try to manage without the Americans, or with as little, militarily, of course, and leave the issue of American involvement in any area of the world to the American political process. And I don't want to see American soldiers going back into coffins to the United States and to be blamed afterwards for our efforts here.
From an energy perspective, if you look about the interest of Russia in the area, so there are already concessions in Lebanon. They have already concessions in Lebanon. They are the biggest supplier of natural gas to Turkey. So I think today they don't afraid or something like that, that someone will bite the share in Turkey energy supply. And I think that in this stage they're not afraid that we will have a big bite in the share of energy supply to Europe. Europe, from the other hand, really afraid that Russia will have a kind of monopoly of natural gas to Europe, so they're trying to diversify through the state LNG cargoes and from the East Mediterranean. But in this stage, I don't think that the Russian feel afraid from huge quantities from the area, from our area.
Are there any? Yes.
I'd like to ask you about the energy policy in Israel, particularly with regard to the regulator, because it's my understanding from reading some articles that the regulator has actually imposed a lot of conditions on noble energy with regard to extraction and ownership of the gas, and required them to actually divest of some of their interests. And based on what in the US one hopes to have regulatory certainty and predictability, and in order to encourage investment, this seems to me to be a very poor decision on the part of the regulator in Israel.
You cannot demand predictability.
Tell me about it. So, yeah, I think I totally agree with you, first of all, but I think that it's quite naturally when a country finds so much natural resources in short period of time, and the country did not was prepared for that. So there is some changes in the beginning. Yeah, it was really hard changes in the fiscal regime, in the export policies, in antitrust policies too, And the thing is that Noble Energy succeeded too good.
They
Yeah,
put a
there
lot
is-
of money in
yeah,
it.
there is nothing. Yeah, I'm totally with you. You know, ideologic, and but that's what happened. It was more companies that drilled, but only Noble Energy. Each exploration well was a huge success. They're amazing. I love them. Yeah, but and I think as an Israeli, not as an industry representative, I think that we need to say thank you for them, you know. But after saying that, and after all the changes in regulation, I can say safely today that regulation today are stable in Israel. Okay, I think that if we will have changes in the future, it will be for good, for the good of the industry, and not for the worst of the industry. So I think we after that, you know, it was really hard time. I was like the not alone, but one of the goalkeepers, you know, that tried to defend the industry. But we after that. After that, I hope we will see more American companies in Israel. I'm really trying
The
to.
potential
Yeah.
now is estimated between 100 and 300 TCF in
Yeah.
our region. It means that should come much more companies to join for these things. I spoke with the Minister of Energy a few weeks ago about it. I compare it to like Israel moved from infant school to college. Maybe there will be one day on the NBA, but that's fine. But we are on that process studying by ourselves. There was a big opposition in Israel at the beginning, a big demonstration towards this in Israel for
Populist.
populist for the money they are doing. We are not there anymore, as Amir told. And I think that after coming a permanent government in Israel, and I hope so, we need it as well, there will be the main mission of the new Minister of Energy is to create a very clear policy which will be much more reforms and giving opportunities to those companies like you mentioned and others to come and to make their future activities with more self-confidence and to be sure that they will succeed, not lose money.
One more comment. You cannot blame an antitrust regulator for doing what they've been told to do, which is their mission. But I can tell you.
No, we can blame them sometimes.
But on the other side of the ledger, I can tell you that I was the one who wrote the draft finding for the Prime Minister that this is a national security matter, and therefore the authority of the regulator can be overruled on a matter of such national importance. And I would write it today again if I had to.
Thank you. On that optimistic note, which is very rare for us because we're always dealing with the Middle East, and we have to conclude because this illustrious panel has got to go to another think tank, Hudson, right now, and I want them to arrive on time. But let's give a round of applause